Today we're reviewing RSD's newest aggressive slack hardtail, the RS291. We're seeing a lot of super slack hardtails these days. It's like a little arms race to see who can get the longest, slackest, most travel on the front. And this is RSD's offering. 160 mil travel on the front, 63-degree head angle, 420 to 435 chainstay. I like that it's sliding and adjustable. I've got it about 425, so I have enough tire clearance in there. 75-degree seat angle. This thing is meant to rip hard. So right off the bat, this is a big bike. That front wheel is so far out there, way ahead of you. And I'm on a size medium. One thing I love about this is I can fit a 175 mil dropper on it, barely, with 175 mil cranks. Here we go. Let's see if we can clean this. Hey guys, thanks. Appreciate it. Just me. Have a good one. Like all other super slack rowdy bikes like this, it's a little bit heavy. You can feel it, but not quite as heavy as you think. So on the climbs and in the slow chunk, the front end is wandery. I'm fighting it. It just doesn't want to stay straight. I think it's that 51 mil offset on the fork. Just doesn't pair well with the super slack head angle. Plus it puts that wheel even further out in front of you. I can ram my way up things. It's not finessed. Even compared to like the Hanzo ESD, which has the same head angle and almost the same travel. The Hanzo was easier to climb on and kind of put that where I wanted to. Here's a little steppy technical climb. It gets a little bit hung up. On paper, this is pretty close to the Hanzo ESD, but there are a few significant differences. Number one, that Hanzo has a much steeper seat tube angle, and you feel it. And ironically, even though the Hanzo has a longer reach, because of that seat tube angle, it doesn't feel as long when you're seated and pedaling. Howdy, thanks. I'm alone. Come on up. Yep. It's a super busy day in Sedona. The trails are so crowded. The parking lots are overflowing. You can't really get a lot of speed because you keep coming across hikers and other riders. It's great that so many people are getting out and that they've discovered Sedona, but there's a lot of traffic on the trail. So the Hanzo ESD feels a little bit more manageable on the trail. I think a lot of that's due to the 51 mil offset of this fork. That's just too much for such a slack bike. The front end just feels kind of like steering a boat. But man, when you stand up and it starts going down, this bike's at home. I feel like the Hanzo ESD, I could get away with it more as an all-rounder geared toward the gnarly stuff. This one doesn't feel like quite as good of an all-rounder. Howdy. Oh, perfect. Thank you. I'm alone. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Stand up and sprint. It accelerates. This bike's also a little bit stiffer than the ESD. RSD steel frames are not harsh, but they're not very supple. They're like a Chromag. They feel overbuilt. The rear end's not really flexing despite being steel, but they feel burly and strong. I'm never gonna get up to speed today. Just not gonna happen. Thanks a lot. I'm alone. Thank you. It's just me. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Just me. Yeah, we may not be able to get up to speed today. Thank you. Just me. This bike does want to play though, wants to jump around. But it doesn't feel like an all-rounder that can descend really well. It feels like a descender that can get by with pedaling. Hello. Thank you so much. It's just me, I'm alone. Thanks. That's perfect, thank you. Welcome to Sedona on a weekend, word is out. So yeah, this bike wants to go fast. Holy cow, I'm seeing people every 20 seconds. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. I'm alone. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. It's like 100 people behind me. Mel, hikers. This bike feels pretty good on the downs. Really good. It just feels planted. But as I was saying, the steel frames from RSD that I've ridden, this and the middle child, they're not harsh like an aluminum frame, like most aluminum frames, but they're not compliant. It's a stiffer side of steel, and it's overbuilt. And I talked to Alex about it, and he says, yeah, I'd rather have overbuilt frames when they're meant for shredding super hard. I don't want someone to have to worry about it breaking, and I get that. So it's got a nice ride, but it's not as smooth and compliant as the ESD. Whew, I'm losing that front end. It's hard to weight it, especially when it's so far out there on the 51 mil offset. I think that's really the wrong choice for this bike. And this twisty stuff, I mean, this thing corners great, but it is giving up some of that exciting, zippy feeling that a less aggressive bike has in here. I know I always talk about slack head angles and how much I love them to a point. I think we're starting to push the point that I don't think bikes should get much slacker, personally. Now, we all ride different terrain and ride differently, so I'm glad they exist and I'm glad there's lots of options, but I can't think of anywhere that I would need this over the middle child, or I would need 63-degree head angle. That is so slack, even on a hardtail. Most of us don't just shuttle on our hardtails and we have to pedal to the top. And this thing will get you there, especially if it's a fire road climb. But if it's a technical, zippy, speedy climb, I find myself wishing for a little steeper seat angle, a lot steeper, like 77, maybe even 78. Shorter offset fork and less travel. But it's working, here we go. It's not zippy, but it's way faster than that Marin Elroy. There are people out there that can really put this to use and really maximize the aggressiveness of this. I'm not one of them. It's no surprise this isn't my first pick at a climbing or XC bike. This thing's meant to shred. But in order to get to the double black diamond, I have to pedal to get there. This thing's jumpy and poppy and fun. This thing wants speed though. Yeah, to get to the double black diamond, I gotta pedal to get there, so I'll be reviewing it through what it takes to get there. That front wheel is so far out there in the really loose kitty litter conditions. It's hard to weight it enough. It actually gives you a little less confidence. This thing needs a healthy diet of speed and steep. And frankly, I'm struggling to find a trail fast or steep enough for this here. It's fun. It's like the middle child in a lot of ways, like a slacker, taller front end middle child. It's so poppy and fun to jump. That's awesome. Oh man, the smile just gets bigger and bigger the steeper and faster the trail gets. This size feels good on me. I like the medium. I'm 5'6" with short legs, long torso. I've got a BMX racing background and I've been mountain biking for 25 years. It feels big. Even when you pop it into manuals with that short rear end, it feels big. But I do like the short rear end. I'm glad RSD kept it short. I'm glad they kept the seat tube straight and I can get a big dropper in there. That's awesome. Got a bit of a grind coming up here. This bike will get there. It's not uncomfortable, but that front end does wander. Thank you. Appreciate it. You really got to be over the front of this more than most bikes. And when it's steep and you're pointed downhill, that's easy because gravity's pulling you that way. But when it's flat and you're hitting flat corners, you really have to consciously weight that. It's not harsh. You don't feel these high frequency vibrations like you do on a cheap aluminum bike. This isn't aluminum, this is steel, but I'm trying to describe how it feels. So it takes out those micro vibrations that just make you numb on a day on the bike. But you feel the square edge hits when you ride over them on this. That rear end's pretty stiff. The best way to describe it is it feels like a Cro-Mag or the RSD middle child. It's a real solid feeling ride. I do get a little bit of bounce out of the back. Just a little too rigid in that rear triangle. Just like a Cro-Mag. And now some people are really gonna like that. If you weigh over 200 pounds, or you charge super hard, or you break stuff, or you like to smash and plow through things, I mean, that's who this bike's meant for anyway. I think you might like it because bigger people have problems with soft frames flexing too much. So if you don't like a flexy frame, I would bet this would be right up your alley. I like that short rear end, and I know some people are gonna wanna run this long. I love sliding dropouts for that reason. I don't know that I'd ever run this single speed like I did on the Hanzo ESD. To go down, we must first go up. And it'll get there. Yeah, I'd like a steeper seat angle. Every time I get on a big climb, I just want to be forward a little more. Thanks, guys. Just me. Yeah. Oh man, if you get some speed on this thing, it just comes alive and makes you grin. A little bit harder to manual than I thought. Not terrible though. Just need to get used to it some more. I rode this on these specialized fuse, and on this type of stuff, I'm faster on the fuse. Just a little bit flatter stuff like that. It's just a little zippier. 160 mil travel pushes that fork out even further ahead of you. That fork feels a mile in front of me. Oh. It's a lot of work to keep momentum through this. It's just a lot of bike to manhandle. But this isn't a surprise. I mean, look at what this bike's meant for. I gotta talk about how it climbs though. Be dumb to do a review and only ride it downhill. Oh, it's starting to wake up when you get these little steep sections. Rides like a big enduro bike. Man, I'd almost put it in the free ride category. Hello. Oh, thank you so much. Just me. Have a great day. All right, here is what this bike is meant for. Oh, it's so loose today. even in this stuff, it's a little bit hard to steer. And I don't feel like having 160 mil travel here is really helping me. Because that back end still wants to bounce a little. It doesn't have any travel. It is nice and composed on big holes. That front end sits so high, but I'm running my fork pretty stiff because I don't want it being divey today. It's very composed in that, as long as you don't need to turn very much. It's so loose, and that front tire is so far out there, I'm having a hard time having the confidence that it's not going to wash on me. Yeah, I just don't have a lot of traction up there. I need a steeper trail. Corners so well though when you get moving. Howdy. Well, there's my 2% of the ride that this bike was meant for. I was able to have less finesse and just plow into those steps because I have so much fork travel that I can get lazy and have bad timing and just slam into stuff. And it's, even though the back bounces, the front makes up for bad choices and bad decisions on big G out single hits. Now, if there's multiple in a row, that's when it gets sketchy, because that's when you're bucking broncoing front and back. But if there's a big huck to flat or a step down or a drop, that's where a really big fork is nice to have. But when there's multiple in a row, I'd rather have less travel. This bike would best suit people who like to ride free ride. Big hucks, huge drops, really steep stuff, big old jumps. That big fork will really help when you're doing one big landing real hard. When there's successive hits, I feel like it's too much fork, but on big single moves, it's pretty awesome what you can get away with on this. We've reached an interesting place in the hardcore hardtail world. These bikes are now able to ride stuff that we don't have trails for yet. To me, this is a free ride hardtail. It's not an enduro bike. It's a free ride bike for hucking off loading docks or finding big jumps. And I find myself at a weird position where I can't fully review this bike to the point where I can push it to its limit. I don't have the trails for it. I don't have the desire to ride a hardtail on the trails that would push this to its limit. And I don't think 99% of the people out there do either. So this review is inconclusive. I can't review this bike because I felt like it never really opened up because I never really fed it what it needed. I've ridden a lot of places in my life. I've been mountain biking for 25 years. I've ridden in 22 different states of the United States. I've ridden in Whistler, British Columbia, Squamish, and I can't think of a trail where I could push this bike, and that's saying something. So it's saying a couple things. One, we've been able to design bikes beyond our trails, which is kind of exciting. And two, if in 25 years I haven't encountered a trail where I think this would be better than something like the Middle Child, I think most people are gonna struggle as well. There's a handful of people out there in the world who could take this and really push it to its limit. I'm not one of them, and I'm betting you're probably not one of them either. That said, if you like sending it and hucking it off stuff and having a big fork to make up for mistakes and wanting to plow through stuff without having to think too much about line choice and just let the front eat it, this bike does that. Because of that big fork, you don't need a landing when you land. You just land on the nose and the back lands and it does what it needs to do. And so you can get sloppy with that. On big hucks to flat and big drops, this would be one of my first choices. It's pretty awesome at that. I don't have a lot of that in my life, so it's not the right bike for me, but having that much travel in the fork will really help. I had to run my fork stiff enough that I still haven't used the last inch of travel. And if I set it soft so I was using it all, it would have been diving more than I like. Downhills are inconclusive for me. I need a bike park and a lift assist bike park to find that. This bike wants a ton of speed. But when you're going super fast, I don't know that a hardtail is the right bike. And I think the rear end's gonna bounce and you're gonna have a hard time braking and scrubbing speed when you're going that fast. So I'm gonna have to say this review is inconclusive. This bike is so hardcore, I can't fully test it. And if that's what you're looking for, is a bike that you'll never find the limit, this might be the bike for you. But I would argue that most people in the world do not have access to a trail that justifies this bike. And that's just me. I think we've gone a little too far. Too much travel, too slack with that offset, and it's just a little too burly. It's a free ride bike, not a trail bike. And so I'm the wrong person to review it, and Sedona's the wrong place to review this bike because I can't let it stretch its legs. It doesn't do the things that a great hardtail does, and it does some of the things that a great full suspension enduro bike does. So you lose the zippiness, the acceleration, you can still pump stuff and pop and play, but I think it's a little too much. And there's no trail on earth where I would rather have this bike than my middle child. I know a lot of you out there are more hardcore than I am. You ride harder stuff than I do, faster. This might be the bike for you. Huge props to Alex at RSD for sending his personal bike so we could get a sneak peek look at this. I'm definitely not hardcore enough for this bike to test it to its limits. And if you test it to your limits, I want to know. Post in the comments below. Are you looking for a bike that's even more hardcore like this? Or are you looking for something that's a little bit more of an all-rounder? Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains and you're invited.